Hello, Dave here. Welcome to Learn JavaScript with me, Chapter 11, the second Ajax exercise. And in this video, we're going to demonstrate how to create the Ajax object, set up the Ajax post request, specify the form content type, which is encoded name-value pairs, package two fields to send to the PHP script, receive the $post associative array in the PHP script, actually execute the Ajax request, monitor the Ajax state, and utilize the response text property. And this is our little form that we're going to use to do this with. Here's our two fields that we're going to pass with that post array. Remember that this is Chapter 11, and the book is Modern JavaScript, Develop and Design. It was written by Larry Ullman, and if you'd like more information, you can go to larryullman.com. We also have davecoast.com out here. I have on the nav bar, Learning JavaScript. If you click on that, here's all of these exercises. And if we look at the Chapter 11 exercise, here's the second one. And you can see, here's that exercise ready to be worked on. Back to davecoast.com. I just wanted to point out this post here. It has that link we just did, js.davecoast.com. A nice little subdomain. The larryullman.com link. Here's all of the code for all of those exercises. And if I hit the continue reading, it brings us up and have a video playlist with all the videos so far in this Learn JavaScript with Me series. So let me send that back to home and refresh that page. Get back to our standard page here, and let's go ahead and start by looking at the code it takes to perform our 8 key items that we are destined to learn, or that we're going to learn regarding Ajax. Bringing up the actual my Notepad++ versions. I have this externally described function. It actually creates the XML HTTP request object, and even if it's older IE, it creates an ActiveX object, but they're both handled and treated the same way once they're created. So the only difference is how you actually create the new Ajax object. Here is the main JavaScript, and down in the middle here, right here, is where we execute that other function, the get XML HTTP request object function. Okay, but let's go ahead and, like the fun with JavaScript, it starts at the bottom. So when the window is loaded, window.onload, execute the window is loaded function. Got a little function here, window is loaded. And if we can do if there is a document and we can create a reference, then we're going to go ahead and create a variable that references the login form ID. So let's go to the HTML for a second. And here is login form ID. And this is the form variable with email ID and password and a button. So we create a variable referencing the form, and then on submit, we execute the validate form function. And once that button is pressed, we execute this validate form function. And in here, we create a variable and we reference the email ID, so that's from the form. And we do the same thing with the password. Then we just check that the length is greater than 0, so anything passed in there. I know, very simple, but again, that's not the purpose of the exercise here. So if we do have greater than anything passed in, we're going to create. So here's where we create the object, create the Ajax object, and then we monitor a state change. If it's done, which is a value of 4, and it was successful, and we get the word back valid. So let's go ahead and see what all that means. If we look at the PHP script, it's going to check out this $post associative array, which means that these are the values that are the indexes to that array. So we have Ajax email, Ajax password. So if they are set and email is equal to this specific hard-coded value and password is equal to this specific hard-coded value, then we'll return back valid. Otherwise, we return invalid. So we can see here, if it's valid, then we just put up an alert box. Otherwise, we put up this alert box. And if we didn't even get any data, we put up this alert box down here. Just a bunch of if statements, no big whoop-de-doo there. Here's the Ajax setup. So we're setting it up. We're going to use the post method. Here's the actual PHP file that we're going to use. Again, here's that PHP file. And the value true indicates that we're going to use an asynchronous request. So once we do the open, then we actually send the request header, and here's where we tell it that the content type and that what type of data is being sent. URL encoded text. And that means that we have to format the data that we wish to send in key value pairs, which are Ajax email, there's the key, equal, and then here's that actual value of what we're getting from the screen, and we're running it through this encode. So we put those two together, separated by an ampersand, so there can be many more, but we only have 2 here, obviously just to get the point across. So we have 2 key value pairs. We have email as one and password as the other, and that's why there are 2 post indexes that we are utilizing. Notice that this says Ajax email and this says Ajax password. Well, that's because we specified Ajax email here and Ajax password there. So we place this into a data work variable, and then we actually execute our Ajax request using the send method, and we pass it data work, which is the data that we just prepared in the argument here. Then we return false, preventing the default browser behavior. So there's our code. Let's take a quick walkthrough in Debugger, see how it actually works, and we'll have the post exercise number 2 under our belts. Let's go back to our browser. Here's our form. I'll go ahead, go back to our exercises just to start from scratch. I'm going to click on number 2 here, Ajax2. Bring this up a little bit. And if I go ahead and don't put anything in there and click login, I get the, you have to put something in the form, buckaroo. Right, there's that, nothing sent alert. Then if I send something that's not good, I'll send these 2 items. And then it says, oh, you messed up the login. Please try again. And then if I do send the correct values, here we go, then login successful, way to go. So I get the actual correct alert. Let's go ahead and run this through debugger. And again, I'm going to start from scratch again. Get that baby up there. Let's turn on debugger. Let's detach this just so I can zoom in. I'll reload to see all sources. It starts out with the HTML. I come to my list and I go to my main JavaScript file. Select that. I have the JavaScript up here. I'm going to take that breakpoint off so that there's no breakpoints here right now, because I want to go ahead and set them in front of everybody. So let's go down to the bottom. It starts with the window onload, goes to the window is loaded. So I'm going to go ahead and set a breakpoint at the first executable statement there for the window onload. Then I will come to the validate form, set a breakpoint at the first executable statement there, and go into the ready state change event listener and set a breakpoint on the very first executable statement there. So that should cover the various actions that can happen. So now that my breakpoints are set, I can come out and actually put in the data. And I'll go ahead and do it with the valid data. So if I put in the right email address and the right password. Well, before we do that, let's go ahead and refresh the screen so that we do the window.onload. So I'm going to refresh the screen. It does the window.onload, and here we go ahead and set our reference to the login form. So I'm going to step through that step, right? So now I have this reference set up, and I can go ahead and set the on submit event listener. So that event listener is now active, and we complete that process. Now I'm at a point where I can enter the values into the form. And I'm going to click login. Now the stops and validate form, right? That's where we broke. And I create the email work password, right, which sets the reference to that element. And then the password work, which sets the reference to that element, the password element. I only have 2 elements. Is the length greater than, oh, look at that. That length is 17, that length is 8, right? And that's my email work and my password work. That's the value, right? I got Ajax at test.tld, right? Here's the values and here's the lengths. Both lengths are greater than 0. Then I create my Ajax object. So I go, my external function, create the Ajax object, and I created the Ajax object here because I'm not in an older version of IE. Return, step again, my Ajax work object has been created, and now I go ahead and set an event listener on my Ajax object for waiting for a state change. right? So that's turned on. Now I am down here and I'm going to go ahead and set up my Ajax request. Post method, 3 parameters, 3 arguments. The post is how we're going to pass data. Here is the actual PHP URL, and here is true for synchronous. So let's step through that. And it goes ahead and triggers my ready state change because I issued an Ajax command, but ready state is equal to 1, not 4, so it'll kick out of there. It kicks out again, and now we're ready to send the header for what type of data is being passed. So we send the header, and now we go ahead and prepare the data. And now data work, notice that this is now this long string of text here. We just click that. See how it's Ajax email equal, and here's what was entered with an ampersand in between. So this is the important key. Ajax email is the key, and then the actual value, the key value pairs. We have one for each variable that we're passing, and it's separated by an ampersand. Now we actually send, so here we actually execute our Ajax request. And then you see down here the network monitor kicked in, showing us that it did a post with these headers, right? Here's the actual post data, right? Ajax email, Ajax password. Here's the values that it passed. And here's the actual detailed code with the ampersand. And here's our response. Our response is valid, and we'll see the valid in a moment. So now that it's valid, we can go ahead and see all these other values. You see ready state is set to a 4. The status is a 200. It's got a valid, so it's going to put up this login successful alert box. I'm going to step again. Oh, the alert box is up. I click OK. And here's the alert box. I think it's just a little fuzzy with the Firebug in there. I might have to reset my browser, clear the cache. But anyway, let me go ahead and complete. So there was that complete cycle through debugger with these values. Now if I send invalid values, I'm just going to put the D in there and just G just to have it greater than 0. And see, now it says you messed up the login, please try again. But it did not click my breakpoints. So that's a little, I'll have to restart. Either way, let me refresh here. And I'm going to go ahead and remove these breakpoints. And turn off debugger. Here's our main screen here. Let me bring up the code. And I said that we went over and covered 8 different items related to Ajax and doing this post method. The first thing was creating the Ajax object, and that's what we did right here, calling the external function. Here's that external function file, and in the HTML, you'll see that both of these files are included with the script tags here. The create Ajax object has to be first before the login because it's being used from there. So going back here, so number 1 out of 8, create the Ajax object. Number 2 is to set up the Ajax post request. And that's our setup right here. We have 3 arguments. What type? We're going to use post type, the URL, and whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, and true is asynchronous. So we're going to go ahead and issue this request and not wait for it, which would be synchronous. But false is for the synchronous, not asynchronous. So that's number 2. Number 3, specify the form content type. Well, we send this send request header method, and we tell it we're sending it a content type, and this content type is the application X www form URL encoded. Then we package 2 fields to send to the PHP script, and that's here where we set up this data in the key value pairs and separate them by the ampersand. And that's the ampersand that we're using right there in front of the second one. Then we receive the post associative array in the PHP script. So once we actually do that send, I guess I should have, we actually send it to the PHP script. And then in the PHP script, we have this $post associative array, which is available because that's the method we're using as post. And we index this array by the key pairs. Right? Here's our Ajax email and our Ajax password from our login, and that's why we use those values here in preparing the data that we're sending. And this actual execute, which is the send method, sends this data work as the argument with these key value pairs as the argument. Then we return false to prevent the default browser behavior of actually submitting that form. And anyway, but this is number 6. I had down as number 6, actually issuing the Ajax request. Number 7 is monitoring the Ajax state. So whenever something changes, we're listening and we're going to do something. If it is a 4, which means it's done, then we're going to interrogate the status. If it's a good status, we're going to check for the response text. If the response text is valid, we issue this alert box. Otherwise, we issue this alert box. And the whole purpose here is just to see what happens when we actually talk back and forth with that PHP script. So we monitor the state, and then we actually utilize the response text property here to interrogate the valid or invalid. We don't actually look at the invalid, but depending on this if statement here, right, passing the data back and forth, we either send back valid or we send back invalid. So there's our 8 pieces. Once again, in summary, we create an Ajax object, we set up the Ajax post request, we specify the form content type, we package the fields, we receive the post associative array in the PHP script, because we actually execute the Ajax request sending that post associative array to the PHP script. We monitor the Ajax state and utilize the response text that is sent back, which is this valid. That is Ajax 2 login form intro. Questions, comments, please leave a message on the video and or let me know, dave@davecoast.com. And you're also welcome to come out here to play with these JavaScript exercises. You can put them in Debugger yourself. Enjoy. Thank you very much for watching.